What if I told you that the greatest secrets ever suppressed by rulers, empires, and regimes were never about weapons, espionage, or even politics? What if I told you that the most destabilizing truths in human history were not about the battlefield, but about the bedroom? Not about borders, but about bonds. For thousands of years, states have asked men to give everything: their sweat, their blood, their very lives. And in exchange, they have been promised loyalty, honor, and love, that their women would wait, their families would endure, and their sacrifice would mean something. But history, when stripped of propaganda, reveals something far darker. Time and again, whenever the veil is lifted, reports emerge showing that loyalty is conditional, that male disposability is structural, and that love, far from eternal, often bends to the cold calculus of survival and status. And each time these truths surface, they are suppressed, erased, buried, because to admit them would shatter the machinery of sacrifice that civilizations depend upon. This isn't conspiracy. This is a universal pattern. From Rome to the Soviet Union, from the ashes of Berlin to the offices of the modern West, what you are about to hear is not just history. It is the black thread running through the entire human story. The silent contract between men, women, and power. A contract written in illusion, maintained by force, and shattered by truth. Every empire begins with a story. A myth designed to bind men together, to convince them that their sacrifice is meaningful, that their lives, spent in toil or on the battlefield, are not wasted. For Rome, the myth was simple glory, honor, and the eternal city. To die for Rome was not a loss, but the highest victory. And behind this story was another, quieter one. The promise that while the men fought and bled, their women waited faithfully, keeping the hearth warm, the family intact, the legacy secure. But peel back the marble facade, and the truth was far more fragile. Ancient historians tell us that after the catastrophic defeat at Cannae in 216 BC, when nearly 50,000 Roman soldiers lay dead, a wave of despair swept the city. Men were gone for years, sometimes never returning. And what did many wives do? Records show remarriages within months, even before husbands' fates were confirmed. Some families arranged new unions out of sheer survival. Others saw opportunity in the collapse of male protection and seized it. The Senate quietly suppressed these accounts, because if the Roman soldier knew that his wife's loyalty might not outlast his absence, what reason would he have to march into another campaign? The illusion had to be preserved. This pattern wasn't unique to Rome. Across ancient Greece, tales of the faithful Penelope, weaving and unweaving her loom while waiting decades for Odysseus, were celebrated precisely because they were rare. For every Penelope in myth, there were countless unnamed wives who chose another path when their husbands failed to return. The Greeks buried those stories, elevating only the myth of loyalty to keep men in line. Fast forward to the medieval world, and the script remained the same. Knights rode to the Crusades under banners of God and honor. Songs and poems told them their ladies would remain loyal, praying in candlelit chambers for their safe return. Yet, when we examine court records, letters, and chronicles, another truth emerges. In France, England, and the German states, wives of absent knights frequently sought the protection and beds of local lords or rivals. Some were coerced, others calculating, but the effect was the same: loyalty was conditional. The church knew this, of course. That's why it preached so fervently about chastity, fidelity, and the sanctity of marriage. Not because these values were natural or universal, but because without the illusion of them, the entire feudal machine would collapse. What man would march to the Holy Land if he suspected his wife would be in another man's arms before his ship even reached Antioch? The truth was too dangerous, so it was buried beneath sermons, songs, and stories. The myth of the faithful wife became not a reflection of reality, but a tool of control. And in this we see the first great pattern of history. Men are told to sacrifice. Women are promised as the reward. Reality doesn't align with the promise. The ruling powers bury the truth and double down on the myth. Rome did it. Christendom did it. Every empire that asked for male blood had to manufacture the illusion of female loyalty, because without it, the sacrifices of men would unravel into rage, despair, or refusal. This is the silent contract, and it is as old as civilization itself. By the 20th century, the machinery of war had evolved beyond anything Rome or medieval Europe could imagine. But the contract remained the same. Men must give their bodies, their blood, and their futures, while the state promised them honor, memory, and loyalty from those they left behind. Only now, the stakes were higher. For the first time in history, millions of men were pulled into war all at once. Entire generations marched into the abyss, and the illusion of loyalty was tested on a scale no civilization had ever faced. The Soviet front, the Soviet Union during World War II, is perhaps the starkest example. While men froze in blood on the Eastern Front, the state promised them that their wives and families back home were enduring the same sacrifice. Soviet propaganda films showed women faithfully waiting, caring for children, and holding the line of morale. But beneath the propaganda, reports told another story. NKVD files, letters from soldiers, and later testimonies revealed a devastating truth. A vast number of women, left behind for years, sought out new partners, not out of malice, but survival. With food scarce, homes destroyed, and men absent, many aligned themselves with whoever could provide. When Soviet soldiers returned, if they returned, they often found their homes changed, their wives remarried, or their children calling another man father. The state buried these realities, because if soldiers had known the truth at the front, if they had realized their sacrifices would not guarantee loyalty, how many would have continued to fight? Nazi Germany and the lost reports. The same pattern unfolded in Nazi Germany. The Spangler Report, the document you've already seen hints of, detailed that a staggering percentage of German women, left behind during the war, engaged in relationships with other men, including occupying forces once defeat was near. The regime classified these findings as dangerous, labeling them state secrets. Why? Because the image of the faithful German woman was central to the Nazi mythos. The soldier marching east had to believe he was protecting something pure, something loyal, something worth dying for. Without that, the illusion of sacrifice collapsed. And so the truth was suppressed, archived in dusty folders, buried under layers of silence. The state needed men to march, not to question. The Western Front in Britain, France, and the United States, the story was no different. Films and posters assured men that, "She's waiting for you." But countless letters and post-war surveys painted another picture. Women who had been encouraged to enter the workforce, taste independence, and live without husbands for years found themselves changed. Some fell into affairs, others simply refused to return to the roles they once held. The returning soldier was often met not with loyalty and gratitude, but with estrangement. Divorce rates soared after World War II. Veterans associations quietly recorded the bitterness of men who felt they had traded their youth, their health, and their futures for a home that no longer existed. Once again, these truths were minimized, hidden, or dismissed. To admit them openly would have fractured the national myth of noble sacrifice. The industrial age of disposability. But war is not the only place where the silent contract reveals itself. The entire industrial age has been built upon the same principle: men give, and women, in theory, remain loyal. The coal miner descending into darkness. The steel worker sweating in the furnace. The factory hand, the builder, the driver, all promise that their labor secures not just wages, but the loyalty of family and spouse. And yet, as modern sociology has repeatedly shown, loyalty remains conditional. When status collapses, when provision falters, bonds often dissolve. The disposability of men is systemic. They are valuable only so long as they produce, fight, or provide. Remove that, and they are replaceable. Modern systems, same illusion. Today the illusion persists, though in new forms. Governments no longer need to draft millions into the trenches, but they still rely on the same myth to keep men compliant. Media sells the fantasy of unconditional love. Hollywood romances and advertising repeat the narrative that devotion is eternal, that love conquers all. Meanwhile, divorce courts, family law, and cultural statistics reveal the opposite: loyalty bends under pressure, status, and opportunity. And once again, whenever the truth surfaces, it is quickly dismissed, ridiculed, or buried. Studies that suggest inconvenient realities about male disposability or female hypergamy are marginalized, labeled misogynistic, or silenced outright. Because just like Rome, just like the Church, just like the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, today's system depends on the illusion. Men must believe that sacrifice leads to love, that loyalty is guaranteed, that their suffering has meaning. Without that belief, the gears of the machine would grind to a halt. The universal black thread, across every era, the same pattern repeats: men are told their suffering is noble. They are promised loyalty in return. Reality contradicts the promise. The system suppresses the truth. From the legionary marching into Gaul, to the knight sailing for the Holy Land, to the Soviet soldier freezing in Stalingrad, to the modern man grinding in the office tower, the illusion persists because it must. The truth, if openly acknowledged, would dismantle the machinery of sacrifice itself. And that is a risk no ruler, no system, no state has ever been willing to take. From Rome's forgotten widows to the wives of absent crusaders, from the silent reports of Soviet archives to the files buried in Nazi Germany, the story has never changed. The faces shift, the banners change, the empires rise and fall, but the black thread runs unbroken. Men are told they are the foundation, that without their labor, without their sacrifice, without their blood, civilization cannot stand. And in exchange, they are promised loyalty, devotion, permanence. The myth that what they give will be honored forever. But history whispers otherwise. Time and again, when the veil is pulled back, the truth emerges: loyalty is conditional, sacrifice is disposable, and love bends not toward eternity, but toward survival and advantage. That is why every empire buries the truth. Rome silenced it, the Church sang over it. The Soviets classified it. The Nazis burned it. The modern West distracts us with movies, advertisements, and ideals it knows cannot hold. Because the illusion must remain intact. Without it, the gears of sacrifice jam, the armies hesitate, the workers question, and the entire machine threatens to stall. This is not cynicism. It is not despair. It is recognition. To see clearly what rulers, priests, and politicians have always hidden: that the contract is not sacred, but constructed, that the loyalty you are promised is never guaranteed, And once you see it, once you accept that the world runs not on truth, but on illusions of loyalty and permanence, you are no longer a pawn in their game. You become something far rarer, a man who knows why the myths exist and who refuses to be broken when they shatter. The truth does not set you free. It makes you untouchable.